Oh, there he is. Ta-da. Hello.
Hello, Ann.
How are you?
I'm hanging in.
Well, you look like you're outside, so that's a good thing.
This is going to be a little bit weird. So when I said this time would be okay, I was figuring that I have a faculty meeting tomorrow, and that I therefore could not accompany my wife and my son to take him to college for the first time. But then I realized that the faculty meetings are going to be on Zoom by university edict. And then I realized late Wednesday that actually, I could go because I was feeling guilty about not going. So in any event, we're on the road to Ann Arbor, and we are at a rest stop on the Otayo Turnpike. Sitting at the table outside, and I'm on the Ohio Valley Turnpike free Wi-Fi, which actually seems okay so far. But I have my MiFi cell thingy to back me up if I need that. So hopefully this will all go okay. But yes, so I am outside, and I had not expected to be outside.
Well, we will do this. So just to go ahead and let you know who all is here before we officially get started, we have a couple of our tech folks. We have a gentleman named Dennis Loudermilk. He is going to be putting us out to YouTube to stream this live. So he's with us. Felicia Sutherland, who is our executive assistant, basically the clerk for this committee, she's with us as well. Danny Martin, who I don't think you've been introduced to yet. Danny Martin is here. He's one of our members, along with Dr. Ed Welch, who's here, the gentleman in the red polo, and
Nice.
And Ben Robertson is on the phone, here in my office. He wasn't able to get hooked up, but he is available by phone. So it's the four of us. Virginia King is our other member. She wasn't able to make the meeting because she was invited to Donald Trump's acceptance speech because she's one of our Republican delegates. So she is in Washington, D.C. doing that. So it's going to be the four of us, but we still have a quorum. So we can conduct.
Okay. All right. That works.
So here in a second, I suppose we can flip over to YouTube. We can sort of follow along with the agenda as far as I don't know if you have that available. Felicia can pipe in or send us a chat if we get out of line, or we're not following along, or we need to do something. Okay. Felicia, can you? Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, just as I recall, the agenda was basically just elect a chair, talk about the report, and figure out what we want to do. Right? I don't recall it being more complicated than that.
So the minutes of the August 13th meeting needs to be approved. So it'll be called to order. You'll do like a roll call quorum, appoint a new chair, then approve the minutes, then the report, and then you're good.
We just need to make sure we, if we have to take any action, we move and second motions and vote and, move on about our business. So if we have to let you know anything, we have a chat that's able to go during the Teams that you will be able to see. So, so if Felicia, if we need to follow up and or we've forgotten anything, Felicia can help us along and steer us along the correct way. Okay?
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
It does. I'm trying to see if I've got the if I can see the where the chat box is. Will that show up for me if she puts in a chat? I'm trying to.
Well, let me. It should. So I have. Yes.
Brian, question. If I type here, who all can see that?
Everyone can see it, depending on what kind of device they're on. They may have to use the bar where you can mute your mic and show your camera. The chat shows up next to the hand raise and participants.
Oh, show conversation. Okay, now I think now I see it. Or it says hello from you.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. I figured out how to get that where I can see. So you're saying that during the meeting, you can
Dean Taylor, would you like to call us to order?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll call the meeting to order. This is a duly scheduled meeting of the West Virginia Judicial Compensation Commission. We have a statutory mandate to meet and update the legislature on market information about judicial salaries around the country so that they have that information and they can use it to consider proper compensation for our judges. And we meet every year unless the legislature has fully enacted our recommendations from the prior year, which it has yet to do. So last year it enacted part of them. And so we're meeting again to see whether we can make another recommendation, and perhaps the legislature will take that under advisement. So the meeting is hereby officially called to order. And then, Andy, you want to do the roll call, or do we have to, do we have to do that? We have to do that officially on the record, right?
Let's do it officially on the record, since we have someone participating by telephone.
Okay.
So I'm just going to call out your name. You just state your presence. Commissioner Ben Robertson.
Present.
Commissioner Dean John Taylor.
Present.
Commissioner Dr. Ed Welch.
Present.
Commissioner Danny Martin.
Present.
And I'd like to note the absence of one member today, Virginia King. Excuse me.
All right. And that is a quorum under our rules, right?
Correct.
Four of the five of us are here. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next item of business is to decide on a chair, who was Greg. I'm happy to have one of you who is more experienced in this be the chair, and I'm also happy just to be the chair if people would prefer that, because Greg was the chair last year. Either way is fine with me.
I'll be happy to nominate you, Dean Taylor. You have support services and the contacts that are helpful for us if you're willing to do it.
I am happy to do it.
I agree.
All right. Well, that works for. I'm happy to sign me up then. I'm happy to do that. Do we need to like vote on that? Like,
yeah.
Can I abstain from voting because it's me? Okay, let's do that then.
Can someone move?
I moved it.
I'll second that motion. You want an individual vote, Dan, or?
Yes.
This is Ben. I vote yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes for me also.
Okay. Well, that's that then. Okay. So thank you all for trusting me with that. I hope I won't screw anything up. Okay, so I guess I'm in charge of the remainder of the meeting then. So the next item of business is we need to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was, sorry, I'm having a hard time, August 13th, 2019. And I was not present, so I'm not in a particularly good position to say whether the minutes were accurate, but I'm assuming that they were. Did those of you who were there note any problems with the minutes or see any issues in terms of their accuracy and completeness as to what was discussed?
This is Ben Robertson again. I move we adopt the minutes as presented.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay. And is Felicia, are you writing down like the motions and the seconds and that kind of thing?
Yes, I'm taking notes through the entire meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Well, so the motion to approve the minutes is made and seconded. So let's vote on that. We're voting by individual name. Is that what we're doing?
Or,
sounds like.
Or we could say aye.
Are we going to say okay? So let's just do this. Okay. I don't think this is a controversial one. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions on this weighty issue? Okay. So I would say that passes unanimously. So the meetings are approved. The minutes are approved. So then the next item on the agenda would be a discussion of the report draft. So obviously we've done these reports for the last several years. We have the basic format and did the work of updating the report. So I guess we should go through and kind of talk about, and then she has helpfully highlighted for us the areas of change from the last go round. So I guess it would make sense to walk through and just kind of look at those and see if we have any questions or concerns about any of the changes or anything else about the meeting, about the draft reports. Does that sound reasonable? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's do that. And again, thank you so much, Anne, for your work on this, which we are greatly in your debt, because I don't know that any of us would particularly have done this, without you. So we appreciate it.
I don't mean to interject. However, I have created a list of bullet points with every page and every change, just to summarize it quickly. And I would be happy to go through that for you if you would like to hear that from me, and then you can discuss. Can I do that?
That sounds great, Anne. Let's do it that way.
Let me just get started that way. So I think I can summarize it pretty quickly from last year's report to this year, what I changed in that report in sort of what the substance of that is. Obviously, as we discussed, the full recommendations of the JCC last year were not implemented completely by the legislature. Therefore, but some raises were enacted. However, some of them are not effective until July 2021, and then some of them are not effective. They increase, and then there's another increase in July. So on page 2, the changes that I made, obviously I wrote down the judicial salaries, and they're going up. The judge and justice and magistrate salaries are not in effect until last year, or until next year. But the family court judges were actually increased as of this July. That was the only category that's in our report that was actually increased.
Right. And that one's just going to stay the same, right? And so family judges went immediately to 103,950, and they're just going to stay there through the next 2 years, right?
Yeah, nothing in the statute provided for any additional increases for them.
Got it. Okay.
You're correct.
Thank you.
On page 4, I basically updated the experience levels of the members of the judiciary, just so you would have that information, pretty basic information. On page 5, we talk about the current judicial compensation and across the country and in some selected states. We picked both our neighboring states, and we have states that are very similar in population, that are kind of different states and have some different characteristics in us, but are about our same population. That's why we selected those states initially. So as you can see, the salaries, continue to rise in other states in our vicinity. The only ones were Virginia and Kentucky that didn't actually increase as of July 2020. We are still considered the 53rd in judicial compensation for both the circuit court judges and Supreme Court justices. And the only territories that we have higher salaries than are the Northern Mariana Islands and Puerto Rico. I also noted that the cost of living bumps us a few spots, but not very much. We were 47th place, I guess you could call it. Last year, we've since gone to 48th. So even the cost of living that's good is not helping us really in our competitiveness in this area. And the mean salary adjustment from last year, just sort of as a general rule, we're seeing salaries or compensation jump up about 1.6% from last year.
Okay. Could I ask a couple of questions to clarify and make sure I understand this?
Yes.
So first of all, with the cost of living figure, as far as I can tell, this is from the National Center for State Courts, and it's just for courts of general jurisdiction, which would be our circuit trial courts, right? And so it's just for that one particular kind of position. That's the only one that we have the national cost of living data rankings. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
They didn't undertake the same analysis with the intermediate or higher court judges. It's just simply that.
Got it. So we don't have fully comprehensive data, but the one data point we've got is that even if you factor in cost of living, because we're a less expensive state to live in than most other states, we're still almost at the bottom, even on that. And then the figure at the bottom, the mean increase, those are national figures. Like somebody looked at how much salaries for different levels of judges are going up each year on the whole, and those figures of 1.61 and 1.57, those are yearly increase, national average yearly increase figures for those particular types of judicial positions.
That's correct. There are numbers in each of the reports. The National Center for State Court reports have that information on the front page as far as those averages. So we just took that and looked at the percentages.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so on I'm turning to page 6, and as you can see, we as I discussed, there's going to be continued increases in the mean and median salaries for high courts and, for all the courts. There was no increase for West Virginia this year, but, the rest of the states, the means and medians continue to increase.
And those, is that for all the states, or is that for the comparison states on the previous page? Both median figures.
This was of the states listed above. So this was our select about 10 states that we're comparing ourselves to.
Okay, that's how I read it. I wanted to make sure I was right about that. So it's a comparison. It's the ones that are geographically next to us and the states that are similar in population, although they may not be geographically.
That is correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
That's correct. I didn't necessarily highlight this, but I just still wanted to point out that, the mandate of the Judicial Compensation Commission is to look not only at high court judges or, courts of last resort and general jurisdiction courts, but also the family courts and the magistrate courts. And we've had considerable difficulty over the years trying to find actually really comparable information to be able to compare our courts with. And, again, because of the wide varieties and duties and jurisdictions of these many kinds of different family courts, it's been difficult for us to do that. We've tried, and, one of the only factors we had is not really in play anymore. As of last year, we were the only state that had a judicial officer that required a law degree that didn't make over $100,000 a year. That was our family court judges. But as of this year, they have, gone up over $100,000. So that's not exactly, it wasn't really relevant. So I took that out.
Right. Fair enough.
And again, the magistrates are a little tricky because we are one of the very few states. There's like less than 10 states now that don't require their magistrates to have a law degree. Most states do. So that puts us in a different position. So that was just a couple points that I wanted to make about page 6.
Right.
On page 7, typically these federal judiciary salaries go up pretty consistently. The numbers that I had, I couldn't find any increases this year, so I'm not exactly sure why. I wasn't able to necessarily find that information, but they haven't gone up, but they do consistently go up every single year. So I think we can just sort of look at the history, and that's just another thing for us to evaluate when we're looking at judicial salaries. But I just wanted to point that out.
Right. Well, we know that federal judges are all paid a lot more than our state judges, and
it's a different
detail.
But that's just another factor that the statute requires us to look at. So I just wanted to point that out since it was a little different than last year. Moving on to page 8. Again, we don't necessarily have any real different information regarding arbitrator salaries. There's no groups that actually actively collect that information, and nor does our West Virginia State Bar collect compensation data. So we are at a real disadvantage to try to get some of these comparable numbers. But we have done our best to try to use some national information that we have to assist us in our comparisons. Moving on to factor 4, discussing the salaries of attorneys in the private sector. The Bureau for Labor Statistics shows that the private practice salaries have gone up about $3,500 from last year to over $100,000 as of attorneys in West Virginia earning an average mean wage of $102,000. So that was, another thing we can take into account. There's also information that we have included in the last couple of years from the organization National Association of Law Placement, and they have a great amount of information, but they don't gather it every single year. So the information that we had from last year is that it hasn't changed because they've not received we don't have any updated information. And Dean Taylor is able to get that information pretty handily. We just don't have any new information for that year. So that section of the report would remain the same. It's still useful information. It's just not as up to date as it was last year, but we don't have anything more.
And my sense of this, Ann, is that, now because the National Association of Law Placement and Career Services people, they're now more concerned with tracking what's going on at the front ends of people's legal careers than they are farther on. And so
Yes.
I gather that they draw a line between 8 years in and less than 8 years in. But what one would really want to see for judges would really be something like, what do people make when they're 15, 20 years in, and what do people who are doing well make when they're 15 or 20 years in, which tend to be the people that we're generally going to want to be seeking judgeships, but we just don't have information that's refined in that way. But it seems safe to say that if 8 years in, without large cities, you're working in a pretty decent sized law firm, you're making 146. That the relative figure for the judge pool is probably something like $30,000 higher than that, I would guess, in the ballpark. But that's just armchair. But I mean, it's got to be higher, and it's got to be probably that much higher.
No, absolutely. I mean, and this kind of goes back to even the folks that are currently in the judiciary right now have a vast amount of experience. I mean, many of the we're talking in the minimum 20 years average amount of experience that these folks have. So this is the best information that we can gather to try to help us along, but it's not totally on point. So we have to keep that in mind as we look at it.
Yeah, I wonder whether this might be a thing where, you can't, I just pulled a figure out of my hat and said I would guess it's this much, and one shouldn't put guesses in a report like this. But I wonder whether we could say something like, because as we already as already summarized, the experience level of our judges tends to be way more than 8 years. It stands to reason that the relevant figure, that like comparable salary figure for attorneys would be, significantly higher than the 146 figure, which is kind of, I think, the closest we can come based on the data we have.
I'll just point this out to you because at the very bottom of page 8, this exact issue has occurred to us before, and we included some information that says the average years of practice experience among members of the West Virginia bench greatly exceeds the 8 years of the NALP data, and the NALP data covering West Virginia is for a geographic region that is significantly larger than West Virginia. Nonetheless, the data provides a relevant, if not clearly precise, benchmark for us to use. If we need to alter that at all, if you want to add any more information, but I think we kind of covered what you were saying there. But
okay,
if you think we need to add anything more there, we can do that. It's totally up to you.
Well, it's probably fine. Let's
move on. Okay. So moving on to page 9, at the bottom of page 9, where we start talking about the cost of living, it really goes into pages 9 and 10. We don't have a lot of information about cost of living. I have some sort of general information about affordability rankings and where we stand. We have some reporting information that says we're the eighth most affordable state in the nation. So that generally our cost of living is good, but we don't have a lot more than that. I had some information last year in the report that was an economic analysis provided by an economist on the staff. She's no longer with us. I have that exact same information to provide this year, but it was sort of an analysis of what the spending power of those salaries were in the different counties to kind of even demonstrate within West Virginia sort of the differences. I don't have that information. I don't have that current information this year, so that's not something we were able to offer as far as accurate information this year. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about that factor, but if you think there's anything more that we need to add, please let me know. So, okay, moving on to factor 6 and factor 7, where we're talking about, so factor 6, we're talking about how we compare, how the judges compare to public officials. That information has not changed much. So again, it's a little bit different than last year, but it's not a whole lot different. And there's not very many state officials that are outside of higher education that earn more than the judges. It's a pretty low number, like less than 50 in the entire state government. So pretty similar. I didn't have any change in factor 7. In factor 8, we talk about any other information, and this is kind of a hodgepodge of information that we've received over the years that has been we've deemed continuing as sort of relevance over the years. Again, we have some summaries of some of the reports that the judges presented us over the years about workloads and some different information about studies that have been conducted on behalf of the judiciary, and those are summarized. We've tried to include that information over the years. The only thing that I had changed, I updated. There was a chart that talks about populations and changes. It's the same states that are in our analysis, in factor 2, and it's pretty much saying the same thing as it did last year. We're continuing to lose population, and only us and Hawaii are the only states in this analysis or in this group that are losing population. So we're losing population at a higher rate than they are. I also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right, yeah. So This is something, and I've read this report, pretty carefully a couple times, and I was reading through it again in the car, and I apologize if I missed something that could have been obvious to me. But what is the with this population data? I understand what it shows as you summarize. What is the relationship between the population data and or what are the population data's implications for judicial thought to be? Because that's not entirely obvious to me. Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do.
Like, is that is it?
I do, and it was a discussion that we had. We included this information in the report several years ago, and have kind of continued to update it. But it was just sort of an overall analysis of what is happening in the states. We talked about workload. So if the population continues to decrease, then the workload could potentially decrease for the judges that are currently. So it was kind of a workload analysis. We thought it might be relevant. And if those, when we were, that's kind of where that idea came from and why we included it. If you
got it. So the notion is that theoretically, long-term trend of population decrease might be correlated with long-term trend in decreasing judicial workload, because fewer people, other things being equals fewer cases, and fewer cases means less work for judges. So it would be a slight factor, I think, saying this would be a factor sort of pointing that salaries don't need to be raised. And so it might have some relevance there, but presumably the data we have about actual case filings and actual judicial workload, which is more direct than population, which is a proxy, would be more highly relevant than this, even though this has some potential relevance. Is that fair?
From what I understand, and the commission members can tell you, obviously their views on it, but I think that's a fair statement. And if there needs to be included, in that section a statement saying that this piece of information is intended to kind of provide more analysis on the judicial workload, but that the commission places more limited weight on it, we could add a statement like that if the commission thinks that that's appropriate, or we could take it out, or the commission, not me, but obviously the members, if they think that information may be of just such limited weight that they don't want to include it, could also come out. But that would be entirely up to you.
I think a word of explanation would be appropriate. It could also be a proxy for economic health, whether the state economically is growing and has more capacity to support salaries or not. But clearly it's not the primary direct indicator.
Yeah, this is Steve. I'm good with it.
Okay, so I will. We can come up with some language and to the effect of what you have already discussed, and you would like me to incorporate that into the report. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that would be good. I can take a pass at that, with my computer later as well. I mean, I think I know, but I think the idea of keep it in there because it's potentially relevant, but kind of explain what we think the relevance might be, and note that it's relatively tangential in its amount of relevance compared to some other stuff in the report. But yeah, I can take a pass at that.
Okay.
Send you something.
No, that makes perfect sense. So let me go on to the very last thing. Again, and this goes to, I guess, sort of some similar, information about economic health, is just our household and our per capita income figures still being very, very low. They've all increased since last year, but we're still we're still in the bottom rung. So, just another indicator of economic health that information has been updated. And the only other thing I haven't, other than the actual facts and figures within the conclusions and recommendations, I haven't changed anything else. Most of all of these are facts and data that are drawn directly from the substance of the report.
Right.
However, there are a few conclusions that are made near the end of the bullet points on page 14 that you may need to review and determine whether or not those are still relevant and you would like them to be in the report. And so if you guys have any thoughts or changes about whatever recommendations you would like, I can incorporate those into the final draft. And other than that,
before we get and before we get to the recommendations directly, I did have a couple of questions about a couple of the conclusions. Most of this, as you say, is just pulled straight from things you already said in the substance of the report, and that all makes perfect sense. I was, maybe I missed this earlier, but at the bottom of page 14 of the draft, there's a reference to the 2014 West Virginia Circuit Judge workload study by the NCSC.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm understanding it correctly, the notion was they looked at it and they said, for the workload in 2014, you should have judges, but you only have 70. That's what that says?
Yes.
And do we still have 70 now?
Let me, I have the numbers. They should be back in one of the very first factors. I should have that. I think there may be 72 now. It hasn't changed much. Let me just double check that.
And then although it's possible, I mean, that's 6 years ago. It's possible the caseload has fallen as well. I just don't know. I mean, I was trying to understand what that was, and then I was also trying to understand how well that still is with 6-year-old data, which is not entirely clear to me.
Okay.
But I'm understanding what it is. And probably that's referenced earlier in the report. I just didn't remember that, whereas I remembered all the other things.
Well, that was another piece of information that was included in Factor 8, which was the other recommendations or other pieces of information that the commission wanted to take into account. Obviously the commission is able to look at all the statutory factors, but if it has additional information that it deems relevant, that it may evaluate that in that Factor 8, which is what we did here.
Earlier in the report, Ann, it says there are 76 current circuit court judges.
I was just getting ready to say that. I didn't realize that had bumped up so high. But we actually went through, all of the judges' bios to make sure that we had all the correct numbers and we had all the accurate information. So yeah, that should be accurate. 76 now.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should just add to that conclusion the notion that we have gone up to 76, but that it still suggests that but still you've got the disparity between 89 and 76.
Okay.
I was wondering about including it myself, but 2014 sounds a little bit dated at this point.
Well, I was wondering that as well. I mean, do we have data? I mean, I guess here's the thing, right? To judge whether what this means now, you would need to know how many judges we have now, and that's increased, and we know what that figure is. It's 76 and not 70. do we have any figures about, like how many cases filed in circuit court in 2020 versus 2014? Because you would probably kind of need to know both sides of that to have a sense of how relevant the 2014 conclusion still is, I'm thinking.
I did not look. I am not sure about the number of cases filed in 2020. Obviously that information would be included in the report as far as the at least up to probably the 2013. If it's a 2014 report, they're not going to have, it's not going to be completely probably up till 2014, but I'm sure 2012 or 2013, the case data from there. But I don't have any current case filing data.
You don't think we're going to have newer data to update that? So it's just that you could note the change in judges and just kind of say make of that what you will.
We can research it. I'm not saying that can't be done. I just haven't done it at this point.
You haven't done it. Okay, so
yeah.
So it might be findable or it might not. I think if we had the other side of it and we could provide enough information for the reader to make an informed estimate as to how fair it is to extrapolate, you can leave it. But if we don't have that data, I'm sorry, I can't. The sun has come out, and I'm seeing the screen. I think it was Ed who said this, but I'm inclined to agree with Ed that maybe we just nix that. It's not clear what the reader can really make of that, given the age of the data, and given that you kind of need to know both what the caseload changes were and what the number of judge changes were to decide how relevant that study still is. And right now, we only know one side of that.
This has been Robertson. How about if we just added a clause in there that if you can't find any current data, we leave the 2014 in there, just note that we can find no other current data to go by. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure, that's fine.
So let me try to determine what exactly you'd like me to do here. We obviously have the current number of judges on the bench. We simply do not have the number of cases or caseload data. If I can find that, would you like me to include that? And what would you like me to do if we cannot? Simply say that we could not locate any other information or something along those lines and put some sort of caveat on that?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. Okay. Yes, if you can't find any more current data,
okay.
We just note so in the report that we just couldn't find any more current data.
Okay.
That makes sense. I know you're making notes to yourself, Ann. I'll give you a second to do that. Or is that?
No, that's fine. We should be fine. I can do that. And hopefully we can get just a little bit more information that will help make that a little clearer.
Okay, cool. And then this last thing. So I gather that the picture in that last point on page 14 about the Supreme Court of Appeals caseload is that if we had a graph, we'd see that the number of cases they were deciding had been declining, but then because of the change, which created more appeals as of right, they've been going back up in recent years. Is that the gist? In the last couple of years, is that the gist of it?
That is the gist of it.
Okay. Oh, I see. And the very last one is the population relevant point. I think I didn't notice that this morning. So, okay, got it. All right. So, so the last thing we talked about is recommendations. I got one more thing, and Ann, you and I talked about, or I suggested email. The only other thing about the report is I wondered whether we wanted to add a table in there someplace that said, imagine ourselves on July 1, 2022, when everything the legislature did last year has already kicked in. Where would our salaries stack up against the rest of the country at that time? Because if I were legislature, I would know that. I didn't see that anywhere in the report. I would suggest that maybe you add a table on that point in the body approval.
I'll say that as this issue, this is obviously relevant information. I was able to look at, to go back just and sort of quickly see that from basically 2018 to 2019 to 2020, the salaries, the mean salaries, so simply the average salaries for these positions, seem to go up somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5556 to 1.76, somewhere in that neighborhood of percentages. So what I had just sort of scratched out here before this meeting was some numbers that would show that. So for example, in 2020, the average salary of a high court judge in the States, it was $181,000 approximately. So what I did was I basically extrapolated that. I increased that by about 1.65 for the next 2 years, which would get you to about $187,000. So that would be basically the 2022 average number of salaries throughout the country. I did the same thing for the circuit court or the general jurisdiction judges, and that puts them at about, again, the mean for the entire country puts them at about $168,000. Obviously I added about 1.65%. Like I said, it was somewhere in that neighborhood, pretty close to that, which was the average increase over the last several years. So I just added that for each year for 2021 to 2022 to see approximately what it would look like at that time frame. And those are about the numbers that I found out. Would you like me to include that information in the report?
I would, because I think it's to me it makes sense, because if I'm a legislator and I'm receiving this report, what I'm going to think is, didn't we do this last year, and didn't we already raise the judge's salaries? And if the report doesn't sort of explicitly say, like, in 2022, here's how we think it will look, and there's still a problem, that there's kind of a gap. But I think what you suggested makes perfect sense, which is to say, look, yes, the salaries will be higher in 2022, and we recognize the legislature did that, and that's great for our judges, and thank you. But the reality is, based on our best estimate of what the world would look like in 2022, and here's what that is. And I think what you did in terms of looking at sort of, standard rates of salary increase across the country and building those in as the comparison point, I think that's a wholly appropriate way to do it. So yeah, if you've done that, I'd like to include that.
Okay, I mean that's up to the members. Obviously, I'll put anything in there that you'd like me to put in.
Understood that we need to decide that, not you. But what do y'all think? Does that make sense to you, Ed and Ben?
I agree with that.
And Danny?
Absolutely.
All right. So that's Danny and Ed. And Ben, are you okay with that?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah, this is Ben.
Are you okay with that proposal?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we all think it's a good idea. So do we need to move something like that, or can we just say we all think it's a good idea and do it? I mean, just to modify the report a little bit. Doesn't seem like you need a motion for that, does it?
Yeah, I think we're still working on a draft, and so I assume Ann will take our comments and send us a draft back, and then we can look at it in total.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so we got that.
If we want to be able to look at this and approve, I think we could say we would adopt the report, by the end of this meeting, we would adopt this report as final, given the additions that are made, based upon the recommendations of the committee during the process. If you want to be able to approve the recommendations today.
Okay. So you're saying we can approve the report before the language is in there, based on the notion that we've agreed what the language will be, and we could still vote to approve it as final based on that. Is that what you're saying?
We've done that in the last couple of years. I mean, I think so long as we're saying, please add in this information and add it to the draft, and then you can adopt it as final that way.
Okay.
I believe that's appropriate. Okay.
Well, if we can do that, that certainly works for me. So do we have any? So I made one kind of suggestion that I just kind of thought of in general going through the report. Do the rest of you have any suggestions about the body of the report, or should we just move to the final thing, which is our actual salary recommendations, the kind of bottom line of the report?
I'm ready to move.
I am too. I think we've got enough information and data there to carry this report.
This is Ben. I agree. So let's move to the recommendations.
Okay. Well, fair enough. So Ann explained to me that I went back and read through the reports, all the reports the commission has issued over the years, and so my understanding is that until last year's report, basically, you would sort of put in recommendations and then kind of stagger them to go in over a number of years and say, this much of a percentage this year, and then, 3% for the next 3 years or whatever. And last year you kind of changed to, let's just make a one recommendation, do this, on the theory that everything we know about the way the legislature operates with judicial salaries in West Virginia says that they're not going to revisit every year. So we're better off just kind of saying, do it once, and then you can leave it alone for a few years and it'll be good. I mean, that's the understanding that I got. Is that consistent with how y'all recall last year's decision making?
That's correct. And a second thing was that we didn't want it to be too complicated. With all due respect to the legislators, we thought if we had made it simple and straightforward, that was better.
Well, if that's the case, it seems to me like the default starting point would be to basically say, we reiterate the bottom lines from last year because they still didn't hit them. And then the only question is, do you want to kind of, build in a little inflationary adjustment to last year's figures, or do you want to leave them alone? And which you want to do, I suppose, depends on how you all came to the figures last year and whether the inflationary adjustment was already in. But if the notion, or whether we want to say, now another year has passed and we should sort of, think of it another year out and add and bump up, by 1.5%, or like the median figure, the normal sort of national mean figure that Ann had, and figure, now we're maybe looking a little bit farther forward in time and we should adjust slightly. But it seems like there isn't really much reason to change the basic recommendation that was made last year, other than just adjusting it for inflation a little bit.
Yeah, this has been Robinson, and I for one felt pretty good about the recommendation last year and the work we put in. And previously, we tried to make this real complicated. And, we recommended adjustments for inflation, et cetera, et cetera. And Danny or Dr. Welch, whoever said, we decided we just simplify the process, and I think that was our chair's recommendation. And I think we all kind of like the idea. And my thoughts were that we basically go with the number we had last year and adjust it to the projected inflation for 2020, which the sites I checked said about 2.2. And so thoughts were that we would just adjust those numbers, and that would be our 2020 recommendation. Just a thought.
That would work for me.
No, I agree with Ben also on that. That should be.
I was thinking about saying that they ought to put all the changes in effect now instead of staggering them over a couple of years as they plan to do.
Yeah. So maybe the recommendation would be to to basically go to the figures from last year, adjusted for let's say 2% inflation, or as been suggested, and we would recommend that be adopted immediately. I see no possibility they're actually going to do that,
Right.
but maybe I'm wrong. But in any event, that seems to me a sensible recommendation in light of all the work that you all did last year and the reason behind the conclusions that you reached last year.
Well, honestly, I don't think they're going to look at it because they're going to say we did it last year, as you remarked at the beginning. Nevertheless, our duty is to say, here's what we think that it is best, appropriate, reasonable, defensible, and necessary to do to support the whole judicial structure. And so it's still appropriate for us to say, you ask us for our counsel, and here's our counsel. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for the attention you gave us last year. We'd ask now that you accept the numbers with some inflationary number and not delay giving the judges what they deserve.
I agree with every word of that. That's well stated.
I concur. This is Ben.
I agree also.
Just to be absolutely clear what I need to do to finalize the report, what you want me to you want me to get the numbers that we recommended last year and whatever those are, add some inflation to them, how much do you want to do the 1.6, 1.7 that we discussed earlier, or do you have another figure that you think would be more appropriate, 2%, 2.2, that I can add just to the top of those numbers to get the 2021 recommendations? And the other thing that I heard, and I don't know if you would want to do, but I am asking, is we state in our recommendation section, based upon our vote, that we recommend that the salaries be increased as set forth below. Would we like to change that to something along the lines of, we would ask that the legislature immediately implement the recommendations of the commission, or something along those lines, that it's not just a number out here for the future sometime for you to, that it's just to say when we're asking them to adopt the recommendation, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is we'd like you to, we appreciate what you've done, but we'd like you to go further, and we'd like you to do so immediately. We take the figures from last year. As to what the inflationary figure should be, I mean, if we're just going to add in the year's inflation, which I think makes sense. I mean, you had like the figures around 1.6 in the report for judges. Ben, your figure was sort of a general national inflationary figure. Is that right?
Yes, I looked at the projected, and it was 2.2. And I don't know the website. It was Federal Reserve or what, I'm not sure.
And that's cost of living?
The projected cost of living for 2020, which is a guess at this point in time.
Okay.
I have a little bit of a problem telling the legislature that we think we recommend this passage, is that outside of our articles or not? I think it would be wise to say that we find this to be a reasonable compensation for our judges, but I don't know that I really want to go so far to tell the legislature I think they should adopt this. I think that might be a little beyond what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, you all have a better sense of that than I do. I mean, the language in the report was based upon a vote, which here I guess would be a 4-0 vote. The commission recommends that the salaries of the blah, blah, blah be increased as set forth below. I mean, maybe we could just say the commission recommends that the salaries be immediately increased, which is a little more deferential than saying we demand that you pass a law, as soon as you convene, but clearly has that implications. But they are recommendations that they've asked us to make, right? So it doesn't seem like saying you asked us to make recommendations about what fair salaries for judges are, and we're making them is overstepping, and we're making them, and we're making the recommendation that they need to be immediately increased. That doesn't seem to me too strident, I think, given our statutory mandate.
Okay, well, that's sure. That's the recommendation, is right.
Okay.
Just, we'll just say immediately increased. We, in the past, we have generally said, like, for example, here's a recommendation, in our 2020 report, it would be for July 1, 2021. So right. we're giving time, but I think based upon what I'm hearing is, that it not be limited to only making an increase on a July 1 kind of another 9 months down the road type of situation. And I didn't mean to insinuate telling anyone telling the legislature what to do. So sorry about that.
Concern is a reasonable one, but the recommend immediate increase language, you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're almost done here. I want to warn you all that one thing I didn't think about was these teleconferences really kill computer battery. I'm at 5%. I may die here in a moment. Can Felicia, can you give me the call-in number in case I have to call back in on my phone because I get booted here? Because I think we're almost done, but I don't want to disappear at the critical second.
Dean Taylor, you can call me at 304 347 4817, and if we have to put you on a conference call with Ben, we can do that, and you won't lose out. But there's not a call-in number for this particular meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. 304-347-4817.
Yes.
If I go dark, I will call you. Hopefully my battery will hold out.
Okay.
So we've got a basic agreement on what the recommendation is. We recommend it be immediately increased. We start with last year's figures, and I guess we need to pick the exact inflation figure. I mean, I'm a little bit inclined to say that since we referenced the specific judge inflation salary figures in the report, that maybe we ought to go with those, even though they're slightly lower than the national figure. But I don't have a strong view on that. And as Ed said, I mean, I don't think they're going to pay any attention to the specifics of this anyway. But I guess we need to decide that what the inflationary figure is that we're going to apply. So it's basically 1.6 versus 2.2. I guess is basically what the choice is.
And you've done the homework. Which can you document the best as would be the 1.7, 1.8, or what do you think?
I mean, those are the numbers those are the average judicial compensation increases. So they're a little more specific than I think sort of a general number. So that, I mean, I can more easily document that in the justification for using that number, I think.
I'd be good with that if everybody else is. I'm fine with that.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Sounds good.
What
Figures
what
in.
would the dollar value be in those two numbers? As far as that goes, that would be a factor with the legislature, I'm sure. As far
What
as the
would-
cost difference.
Danny, this is Ben. It's not going to make a lot of difference. At the 2.2%, it would take the Supreme Court justices from a recommendation of 169.01 to 163.440. So it's not going to make a big difference.
No, that's not going to make a bit of difference. No, I agree, Dan.
All right.
So I can again make the change. If you adopt the recommendations, by motion and you all agree, I can add those figures in and then just circulate the final so you can see it prior to it being printed and being able to be sent to everyone involved that needs to see the report. But I suppose that's up to you if you want to.
Well, sounds to me like we have substantive agreement on the recommendation, so we just need a motion, right?
This is Ben. How about I just move that we adopt the responses noted and discussed, and we trust Ann to make those and send us out a final copy, and that would be my motion. Okay.
All the recommendations, that changes that we've made, right?
I'm sorry?
All the changes that we've made in this report, we can do it here at the end, at the very end, make a motion to do it all.
Yes, and we can adopt that as final. Just I will let you see the language prior to going out, but we've already just discussed it and agreed on the substance of what would be included. So you will have the opportunity to look at it one last time to make sure that it's what your recollection is, and there's no other issue with it. Otherwise, it can be final.
Okay. Is that a second, or do we still need a second?
Say second, Danny.
Second.
Okay,
I'll
fair,
give a second.
fair enough. Oh, and Felicia asked a question in the chat. So what's the exact figure? And the figures that Ann had documented, Felicia, are at the bottom of page 5 of the draft report. And I think one is 1.61 and one is 1.57. But why don't we just call it 1.6 as a, for simplicity's sake, or we could say 1.59, which is in between the two if we want. But let's just call it 1.6 and say that we took that figure from the national yearly rates of judicial salary inflation as documented on page 5.
I can also share with you quickly before hopefully anybody's computer dies what the numbers were exactly last year and what the 1.6 added to that would be, and what our exact recommendations are. So give me just a second.
Okay. I'm at 2%, so we will see.
Okay.
If I make it.
You want to go ahead and vote, and then Ann can send us or show us those numbers.
Well, that's true. I guess we could vote without seeing the numbers, right?
Yes, that way we
Okay,
can.
let's vote then. We've got a motion to do what we've just discussed, to make the recommendation of last year's figures plus the 1.6%. Motion and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? My motion passes by a vote of 4-0.
Okay. So the number of our Supreme Court justices last year was $160,894. 168.9. Times 1. That would be $163,468.
Okay.
That's fine, Ann. You can just do the rest and then mail them to us if you want.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd read them out loud so everybody could hear them really quickly.
Okay.
So the circuit court judge salary would be $151,454. The family court judge salary would be $115,752. And the magistrate salary would be $69,116. So those would be the recommendations. Those would be the numbers that we would be looking at.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Wonderful. Any good one going to move to adjourn?
Yeah, I'm saying we're done.
Yes.
Right? That's it. All right. Let's do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Thanks, guys.
Aye. And thank you so much, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. It's a pleasure doing business with you.
Good luck in Michigan.
Yes, good luck.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Safe
All right.
travel.
My computer made it. Awesome. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye.